In this podcast episode, Ben Shapiro addresses a range of pressing issues, starting with the misinformation surrounding an ICE immigration case involving a 5-year-old child. He then delves into recent arrests related to church protests over immigration enforcement, analyzes political developments affecting the 2026 midterms, explores notable foreign policy challenges and maneuvers, and touches on cultural events, including a high-profile podcast appearance by Michelle Obama and the latest Academy Awards nominations. Ben begins by dissecting misleading media coverage, claiming ICE arrested a 5-year-old boy as bait to apprehend his father. The original story, popularized by legacy outlets like the New York Times and the Daily Mirror, suggested that the child was detained alongside his father. However, official statements clarify that the father, an undocumented immigrant with an active asylum claim, fled, leaving his son behind during the arrest attempt. The boy was not arrested, but taken into custody with his father after authorities refused to leave him with another adult in the household due to safety and legal concerns, especially given historical issues with unaccompanied migrant children lost in the system. Ben argues that this nuance was buried by the media, which sensationalized the story to depict ICE negatively. He notes the impossibility of exempting parents from law enforcement entirely due to their children without creating untenable legal contradictions, emphasizing Vice President J.D. Vance's perspective on responsible enforcement and parental accountability. The discussion shifts to a controversial ICE policy enabling agents to enter homes based on administrative warrants tied to final deportation orders, rather than traditional judge-signed criminal warrants. Ben cites Wall Street Journal reporting indicating this policy expansion originated under the Trump administration and remains subject to litigation. While some immigrant rights advocates claim rights abuses, Ben explains the legal rationale behind the policy. Individuals with final deportation orders have already had their due process, and entry is justified in enforcement. However, instances of forceful entry without consent, such as in a Minnesota case involving a Liberian man, underscore the tension surrounding these practices. He asserts that criticisms of ICE should not rely on false portrayals like the 5-year-old bait narrative, as such exaggerations weaken legitimate policy debates. Ben addresses the DOJ's recent arrest of 3 individuals who disrupted a church service in St. Paul, Minnesota, as part of anti-immigration protests. These arrests fall under the FACE Act, a bipartisan 1994 law designed to protect both abortion clinics and churches from forcible obstruction and intimidation. The protest targeted a church where an ICE official serves as pastor, and the protesters allegedly seized the service to push their agenda. A civil rights attorney involved in the protest claimed they were welcome attendees, but Ben refutes that characterization, describing their behavior as a deliberate, disruptive takeover not protected by the First Amendment. He highlights the DOJ's strong stance, supported by church attorneys emphasizing the sanctity of worship spaces. Ben also notes the failed attempt to indict CNN's Don Lemon, whose case was dismissed by a judge with potential conflicts of interest, sparking debate over political bias and legal impartiality. Local officials and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey condemned the arrests, but Ben criticizes their selective defense of lawbreaking amid broader public safety concerns. Ben analyzes the political ramifications of these immigration conflicts heading into the 2026 midterms. Polling suggests Democrats currently hold an advantage on the generic ballot, even amid typical off-year trends favoring the opposition party. Yet, he points to Democrats' embrace of increasingly radical immigration rhetoric, such as Eric Swalwell's vow to bar ICE agents from work in California and proposals to defund ICE, which may alienate moderate voters. He contrasts this with Republican challenges in messaging and internal policy disputes. Virginia Democrats are highlighted for shifting sharply leftward on taxation, criminal justice, and immigration protections, further emphasizing party polarization. Conversely, California Governor Gavin Newsom's campaign is noted for focusing attacks on former President Trump while soft-pedaling policy details. Ben underscores that both parties risk misreading the electorate by catering to extremes rather than pragmatism, particularly on immigration. Turning to international affairs, Ben discusses reported Trump administration efforts to engineer leadership changes in Cuba following Venezuela's regime collapse, suggesting a palace coup could destabilize the communist government. Alongside economic sanctions and visa bans on Cuban medical officials, this strategy aims to hasten political transition. Meanwhile, the U.S. is deploying naval forces towards the Persian Gulf amid escalating tensions with Iran. President Trump is quoted warning of severe consequences if Iran proceeds with executions of protesters, with recent hangings reportedly canceled following U.S. threats. The movement of aircraft carriers into the region signals serious military pressure, though the goal is deterrence rather than open conflict. In Syria, U.S. officials are considering a complete troop withdrawal as the Assad regime reasserts control over northeastern regions supported by Kurdish forces. Ben questions the wisdom of normalizing relations with Assad and Turkey, seen as malign players, amid ongoing regional instability. Ben reviews Jared Kushner's recently unveiled plan to rebuild the Gaza Strip, envisioning modern infrastructure, new cities, and significant investment contingent on Hamas's demilitarization. Kushner stresses that no Plan B exists should Hamas refuse to disarm, placing the success of Reconstruction on compliance with strict security and political conditions. Ben scrutinizes this approach, raising questions about enforcement mechanisms and the involvement of regional actors like Turkey and Qatar, which have supported Hamas. The broader challenge lies in transforming Gaza's political landscape, including dismantling Hamas's ideological hold and reforming UN agencies like UNRWA. While ambitious, the plan faces substantial practical and security hurdles. On a lighter cultural note, Ben and his guest, Lyndon Blake, discuss Michelle Obama's surprising guest spot on the highly popular and formerly provocative Call Her Daddy podcast. The interview foregrounded themes of women's empowerment and societal patriarchal critiques, somewhat ironic given the podcast's origins catering to sexualized female narratives. Michelle Obama lamented traditional gender roles, including the expectation that women adopt their husbands' surnames after marriage, a point Ben highlights with some humor given Michelle's own name change. The conversation revealed tensions between feminist messaging and cultural realities, with critiques of male perceptions and dating dynamics sprinkled throughout. Ben and Lyndon expressed skepticism about the podcast's perceived authenticity given its past tone. Finally, Ben offers commentary on the recent Oscar nominations. He expresses skepticism towards several frontrunners, particularly the heavily nominated One Battle After Another, which he finds overrated and poorly executed. He notes Sinners received the most nominations ever, though he cautions that category inflation over the years affects comparisons with classic films. Some performances in films, like Ethan Hawke's in Blue Moon, earned well-deserved recognition. Conversely, Wicked for Good was largely shut out, which Ben attributes to narrative weaknesses in its second act. Other nominated titles include Hamnet, F1, Frankenstein by Guillermo del Toro, and Bugonia, though many remain unviewed by Ben. He critiques director Yorgos Lanthimos for predictable, ideologically bent work and sees the nominations overall as underwhelming relative to past years.